Hello, BookTube. Um, this is a rather strange place to be filming. Some of you who've been watching this channel for a while will remember I used to have a little man cave where I could read and where I could film. But the family's children getting older, rooms get reassigned, and my space shrinks exponentially. But I want to do a tag, if I can get through this without wild children running by and screaming and yelling and playing. And I'd like to do a tag. It's called the Reading My Country tag. The original tag's by Cook, Read, Create. And I was tagged by Elena Macradina, who's a booktuber who I'm doing a buddy read with of Anne McCaffrey's Dragonflight, and a booktuber who I enjoy very much. I've seen other versions of this. I just watched the Steve Donahue version, which as always was wonderful. And I would like to echo him here. What country are you going to talk about? And it should be obvious to say the United States of America in my case. And in the past, because of my history and my family history, I've often stated New England or Vermont. And sometimes that's tongue-in-cheek. And there was a time in our country when that was a much more common than we might think. But with all that's going on in our country in the present day, it loses its humor, sadly enough. And so I will restate, it's a country I love very much, the United States of America. So what is your favorite childhood book from your country? When I was little, the way we read was a little different. There were children's books. Young adult classifications didn't exist. We had comic books. We had children's classics that we were directed to, and many of them, like Tom Sawyer, which I loved. A lot of the authors were English. I mean, I'm from New England. Robert Louis Stevenson, H.G. Wells. Some were French, like Jules Verne. And we had an international taste for literature back then, even if we didn't really always identify it as such. But I would have to say that my first favorite from childhood was this, and I have here the selected writings of Washington Irving, which I've shown on this channel before, and it's edited by Sax Combs. And I remember these stories vividly. Here you go. This is just the Modern Library in New York. So it's from 1945, so it's been around in the house for a long time. And the contents from the sketchbook: Rip Van Winkle, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. From the Alhambra, I remember this being magical when I was a kid, because TV wasn't quite as big then. We didn't see the travel documentaries and all that. So I would say Washington Irving. So next is, what's a book from your country that you read in school? So for this, you have to excuse me for leaning forward here because I'm in a space I'm not used to. That would have been Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. Now, when I was a little boy, we used to watch a show. Some of you will laugh when I say this. Some of you will look back on it fondly. I do both. We used to watch The Waltons. And John Boy Walton was sort of the narrator, and his writer hero was Ernest Hemingway. And sometimes we forget just what a cultural phenomenon Hemingway was. And The Old Man and the Sea, as you can tell, is very short. And my kids are just tearing up the place now. This is a Scribner's classic, illustrated by C.F. Tunnicliffe and Raymond Shepard. It's dedicated to Charles Scribner and Max Perkins, and Max Perkins had a house down the road from me just a couple miles. This is the primary reason The Old Man and the Sea, or was part of the reason Hemingway won the Nobel Prize. So I remember reading it. It was a short little thing, and had a huge impact on me, and enjoyed it very much. I am one of those people who really do enjoy Hemingway. Question number 4 is, what book is set in your favorite area in your country? Well, I was born in Vermont. I've lived good portions of my life in Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Florida, Washington State, New Mexico. I don't even think I can name every place I've lived in the country. I'd always be forgetting something. And each one of them has been magical, and the country is so vast, and the areas are so different and so interesting. I lived in Georgia for a while. And they do have cultural nuances and stuff. But I really loved living in Maine. And this is a book I don't get to show very often, and I've had it forever. It's a Prager book. It was published in 1974. And it's a seal called Andre. See if I can get up there. And Andre was a seal. I think they made like a little TV show about this. And Andre is a seal that would travel between the aquarium in Boston to this little town in Maine every year. And he had originally been befriended and protected and saved by Harry Goodridge. Here's Andre. And I remember going down to visit Andre. He was quite a celebrity. And I loved the story. So it was a New England aquarium where I went. So this is a warm and loving book. It's a true story of a unique human-animal relationship. The 14-year friendship between Harry Goodridge, an animal lover and down east free spirit, and Andre, a harbor seal, who is comfortable in the Goodridge's home as or in their Beagle's doghouse, as he in Maine's Penobscot Bay, which is where I spent many years of my life. For Harry Goodridge, an arborist, the fancy name for a tree surgeon, and freelance scuba diver, Andre represents the fulfillment of a long-held dream, an ocean-going companion to join him in the deep water. So it's in Rockport, where I've spent many wonderful hours. And so I don't know if it's still around or if you can find an old copy somewhere. And I don't know. Maybe it's just nostalgia, but I love it dearly. So question 5, I think it is. What is a historical fiction book set in your country? And this was tough. I love historical fiction. I love American historical fiction. I love other historical fiction. But when I finally had to come down to it, this old beast is 2 volumes in one, but East of Eden by John Steinbeck. And I don't know, this is Viking Press, New York, and East of Eden was a copyright from 1952. And it had a big impact on me when I read it fairly young. I don't know I haven't read it since, so I don't know how I would react to it now. Steinbeck can be problematic in some ways, but I think he's. I enjoy him more often than not. So, East of Eden is a monumental novel of grassroots America, sweeping from Connecticut to California, spanning several decades in the passionate lives of two turbulent families. The towering figure of Adam Trask dominates the story, a good man whose satanic wife revealed to him the shuddering ecstasies of lustful evil. Wow. East of Eden. So then, what is a book from an indigenous author from your country? The old saw, and I think it's more important now than ever, is that all Americans, every single one, is descended from immigrants, migrants, every one of us. And to reiterate that point in a troubling time in our history right now, where some folks think they have more rights than others based on their ethnicity or their skin color or their religion. I thought I'd show this. This is the Prehistory of the Americas. It's an archaeology textbooks by Stuart J. Fidel. It was it's Cambridge University Press, and it was published in 1987. I have the 1992 version here, and I'd like to read you the table of contents. List of illustrations. Preface. Preface to the first edition. Chronologies. And the very first chapter is The Development of American Archaeology, a brief review. So this is telling you how the field developed. The next chapter, when we first start dealing with the record, is From Africa to Siberia, Early Human Migrations in the Old World. Then 3 Paleo-Indians. Whether it's the Bering Land Bridge, whether it's Ellis Island, if you are from Europe, Africa, Asia, Oceania, other parts of the Americas, we all have something to contribute in my book. And so Indigenous, and my family's been here for 300 years. There's families down the road that have been here for 3 years, and there's families from the other end of the road that been here a lot longer than 300 years. So it doesn't in times like ours, I think I'd rather just say, if you're an American, you are an American. So we'll move right along. So what is a classic book from your country? Well, to rediscuss that last point a little bit, in the Library of America, the United States has a national literature, a canon, so to speak. It's limited, and it has its flaws, but where we try to keep our heritage in print, and I'm a big fan. I would probably pick some other volumes, and that's fine. That's part of being an American. But for classics, I'd like to talk about Parkman. And this is his France and England and North America. It's 2 volumes. So the first volume is Pioneers of France in the New World. the Jesuits in North America, La Salle and the Discovery of the Great West, the Old Regime in Canada, and then under Volume 2, we have Count Frontenac and New France under Louis the 14th, a half century of conflict in Montcalm and Wolfe. So excellent, excellent histories, dated, but written well and written in the old style, and very, very nice. And then, what is a book from your country that you haven't read but would like to read? They're myriad. They're myriad. I got away from science fiction for years. Not strategically, just seemed to happen. Life takes off in different directions. There's some wonderful science fiction writers in the United States I'd like to read to catch up. So I think that's an area where I really feel the early part of my literary DNA is from, but I've lost track, and so I'm hoping to do some of that. And what are some of your favorite authors or books from your country? Now I know it's would be typical for me to go with the classics, and they're classics for a reason, and I love them, or some of them. But I also love the real fun stuff from my country. Oh. Edgar Rice Burroughs. Oops, there goes some books. Robert E. Howard. Heinlein. Asimov. Philip K. Dick. Theodore Sturgeon. I'm always afraid I'm going to say something from the United States, which is a good point, because I read people from everywhere. So this was a wonderful, wonderful book tag. Makes you think about what it means, and I wanted to end up with science fiction authors because I believe, because I was formed early by science fiction authors, and hey, classics from my country, let's throw in Louis L'Amour. But because I was formed by science fiction writers early on, my views, borders become a problem. I love my country, but borders can become a problem. Think of Star Trek. It's all humanity and then alien races. Think of a lot of science fiction when you turn and you're facing a threat to the whole of humanity. The borders dissolve, and in times like these, I'd like to think that some of that spirit, the human spirit, as opposed to nationalism, still exists. So, on that note, I'm going to tag Ernest Lee Eston, and I know he's been real busy, but I'd love to hear his take on all this. And thank you, BookTube.